basically to read, the major books or the major writings of important thinkers and philosophers. Okay, so the classical method, insofar as grammar is concerned, I think, you know, if the purpose is to read and understand, then grammar will just help do that. Now, basically, when people do not understand what they are reading, then the tutor, yeah, because it's one-to-one tutoring, will help to explain this. Okay, so of course there will be some emphasis on grammar, okay, but more on understanding. So it is not primary. Like grammar is not primary. Grammar is not the first thing that you look at. Okay, although it is important in the classical method. Okay, so in grammar translation, this is the first institutionalized method. Yeah, uh, sometimes the short form is GTM. Sometimes it's referred to also as the army method. Okay, um, and some people look at it as looking at grammar and help using grammar to help translate one language to another, okay, from first language back to second language, and this is what grammar, the role that grammar plays. Yeah, uh, this is the first institutionalized method, meaning to say this is the first method that was used in schools, to a large in a large scale, and grammar translation is also very traditional. Basically, if you think of grammar translation is not referred to as the army method. The army method is the audiolingual method. Okay, I don't know whether it's here. Yeah, it's here. Okay, so the grammar translation is the first institutionalized method. It's related to the classical method. Okay, it's just moving from the classical method to the grammar translation method because people were going to, I mean, education is more mass education rather than one-to-one. Okay, and then I think before this dot, we should mention audiolingual method. Yeah? Before the third bullet, we should mention the audiolingual method, which is also referred to as the AMI method. Okay, so in this, in this next slide, you have audiolingualism. Okay, and this is the basis for the audiolingual method. Yeah. So this audiolingual method is what replaced grammar translation. Okay, so you have classical method, you have grammar translation method. Okay, classical method is one-to-one tutoring. Grammar translation, the emphasis is on looking at the first language and looking at the second language and doing, maybe translating, back translation, and so on and so forth. Okay, so grammar to some extent does have a lot of emphasis because the emphasis here is on reading and writing. Okay, reading and writing. Yeah. So when you had the audiolingual method, the emphasis changed slightly to listening and speaking. Yeah. And with listening and speaking, I think we can understand that grammar will not play that much of a role, or it will play a secondary role. Yeah, because the emphasis in audiolingual method is to use the language, yeah, especially in speech. Okay, so when you want to use the language, um, the grammar, in speech, that grammar is sometimes not given that much attention. So in audiolingual method, grammar is still important, but it's not the goal. Yeah? The goal is really, in the next slide, you'll see, is habit formation. Okay, so the issue here is habit formation versus creative construction, which we will talk about in a little while. Okay, but anyway, with audiolingual method, there were a lot of drills. Okay, there were a lot of drills, drill and practice. Some of you may have heard of language labs, the traditional language labs, where you had, listen to many exercises, and you were required to repeat the drills. Okay, so that was part of the audiolingual method, because um, the belief was that if you can create, language production is like habit. And if you get into a habit of saying the right things or saying it right, then basically you've learned the language. Okay, so that was audiolingual method. It was driven by behaviorism. Yeah, and because of the um, emphasis on this kind of practice, yeah, because of the emphasis on this kind of practice, there were a lot of people who were a little bit unhappy, and suggested different kinds of methods. And one was Berlitz, who suggested the direct method. Okay, so in the direct method, there was no grammar at all. It was all practice in terms of using the language, not drills, but speaking. Okay, speaking and listening. Uh, Not so much pattern practice, drills using, repeating the same kinds of patterns, but trying to use natural language, direct method. Okay, and so the approaches that have been important or that have been influential, as I mentioned, from a scientific point of view, because in the classical method there was no real science. It was just on the basis of, if you know how know the language, you can try to teach the language. Okay, but with the audiolingual method, okay, there was behaviorism behind it. Yeah, and as I mentioned, the emphasis was on drills and on habit formation. Okay, I'd like to know whether you are familiar with habit formation. Anybody? Are you familiar with the concept of habit formation?
No.
Me no, doctor.
Betul ke? Is this true? I'm sure it has been introduced in some of your previous classes. Behaviorism, are you
Yeah,
familiar
I
with
think.
behaviorism?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Who do you associate with when people talk about behaviorism? Can you think of any names? What year now? You're in second year, right? Or are you in the third year already? Second year.
Second year.
Second year. Okay. So you should know. If people say, okay, behaviorism, or they don't say behaviorism, but they talk about the people who are involved in behaviorism,
Is
then
it
you should know what they're
Skinner?
talking about,
Tina?
right? Sorry?
Skinner. Skinner.
Yeah.
Tina.
Again?
Skinner.
Right. Correct. Idian. Well done. B.F. Skinner. Okay. B.F. Skinner. Pavlov. Have you heard of Pavlov?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pavlov,
Yes.
and what did he do? I mean, do you remember what he did?
The cat
Not the
conditioning.
cat, the dogs.
Oh,
The
the
The dog.
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 Yeah,
Conditioning.
Pavlov and his dogs. Okay. So what was he able to do? He was able to make the dogs salivate, right? Uh, by just ringing a bell through pattern practice. Okay, meaning to say, every time he put the meat um, for the dogs, he rang a bell. Okay, and the dogs would salivate because they wanted to eat the meat, right? They salivate. Okay, so when he took away the meat but rang the bell, the same thing happened. Although there was no meat, the dog still salivated. Okay, so that was basically pattern practice, meaning to say you associate things, you do certain kinds of patterns, and then you get certain kinds of results. Okay, so habit formation is basically the same thing. The idea that by repeating things, many times, in the end, it becomes a habit. And if what you repeat is correct, okay, then your habit will become correct habit, right? And if you don't repeat things correctly, okay, then it will become not what you want, right? Because it's bad habit. Yeah. So basically, the idea of a drill is so that you can repeat things correctly all the time. Okay. So when you repeat things correctly, it becomes a habit. Okay. And you will find that one of the reasons why sometimes some teachers are very strict with drills and they don't want the students to make errors or or say things incorrectly is because they don't want the students to form the wrong habits. Okay. Yeah. So that's why they make a mistake, they get punished or something like that because they don't want a bad habit to be formed. Yeah. So this is the idea with the same thing is applied to languages. Yeah. And for that reason, what happened was many students were not willing to speak because they were afraid of making errors. Right? They will only speak only when they know that what they say is correct, no grammar errors, and they will not be punished. Okay. So this was audiolingualism, and this was behaviorism, this was drill and practice, and also habit formation, yeah, for forming the correct habits. Yeah. So you can imagine that this kind of an approach is going to be met with a lot of, you know, unhappiness lah on the part of the students. I don't know whether you like to be taught languages that way. Do drills and practice, you repeat things over and over again. And then if you make mistakes, you will be reprimanded. Okay. And you will only speak when, when you are sure you will not make any mistakes. So you can imagine the classroom will tend to be a little bit teacher fronted, right? Teacher controlled. Yeah. Only the teacher will speak, the students will not speak that much. Yeah. So this idea of habit formation was challenged by Chomsky. Okay, Chomsky. So I know you have heard of Chomsky. Okay, and I did mention that I think he is, a very intelligent person, a genius, because he talks about grammar, not in terms of what is already on paper, but he talks about grammar in our heads, yeah, what is happening in our heads, his idea, what he is proposing. So anyway, he suggests instead of habit formation, creative construction, which means that um, any human can create language or sentences that they have never ever heard before. Okay, they have the ability to do that. So in other words, if it is habit formation and it's based on drills and repeating things that you hear, yeah, it's as if to say that for us to learn a language, we have to listen to people all the time, and we have to repeat what they say, and what we don't hear, we won't be able uh, to create or construct a sentence because we have not gone through those drills. Okay, but Chomsky is taking a different perspective. He's saying that each human has this ability to create language that he has never or she has never heard of before. So he's got this innate ability to do so. Okay, so that's what Chomsky suggests. Okay, creative construction as opposed to formation. These things we will also revisit as we go along, yeah, in the next presentations and so on. And this is what Krashen picked up on. Yeah, Krashen was many teachers were happy with this idea because with this idea, drills and practice will not become central. It can still be used, it still can still be important, but it will not be central. Yeah? It will not be like everybody has to do just drills and practice. Okay, and errors that students make were not seen as bad habits, but were things that would help the teacher understand what is happening, yeah, with the students in terms of their understanding of how the language works. Okay, so Crescent picked up on this. Okay, and we have the issue of language versus acquisition. Okay, language learning versus language acquisition. Okay, so these are things we will pick up also as we go along in the next presentations. But generally, okay, language learning means formal learning in the classroom. Language acquisition means informal learning, things that you know, a child, for example, will tend to learn language through acquisition rather than through learning. Okay, we learn our first language through acquisition rather than through learning. Okay, because this happens in the classroom. When we go to our standard one or even kindergarten classroom, we already know how to speak a language, right? So this was acquired rather than learned. Okay. So based on all this, yeah, Chomsky did not suggest any new method. Yeah, Crescent to some extent gave some principles or hypotheses, but based on this new approach, a new approach, communicative approach was proposed. Yeah, and the communicative approach, as the name tells us, is something that focuses more on communication. So language for the purpose of communication. Okay, and because Chomsky and maybe even Crescent did not suggest specific kinds of methodologies, not like audio lingualism, not like direct method, not like grammar translation, there were various methods, okay, that different people suggested that were received uh, at different levels, meaning to say some were well received, some not so, okay, and these were referred to as designer methods. Okay, examples are suggestopedia, total physical response, community language learning. Have any of you heard of any of these?
Yes. During
No.
linguistic class.
Oh no, there's
TPR.
somebody
No.
saying no, there's somebody saying yes. Did you all attend the same classes? Some of you were
TPR.
sleeping maybe during some of these classes. Okay,
Maybe
anybody,
I
During
was sick.
maybe what?
I was sick during the class.
You were sick during the class. But then that would mean that the lecturer was teaching all the different designer methods in one class, or were you sick for many classes? So what do you remember? What do you remember of this?
I remember TPR, total physical response, learned in
Yeah.
linguistic class, which is movement, if I'm not mistaken. Like, if for example, if you want to say hi, it's like waving like that. Is it right?
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah,
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
right.
And
Uh,
then yeah, I only remember TBR.
Okay. TPR is, a lot of these designer methods, they focus on one or another, um, aspect of acquisition. Okay. Like, for example, TPR, um, the thing with TPR is that, uh, sometimes people don't want to respond immediately to something, right? They don't want to use the language immediately. So with TPR, you can still uh, assess or gauge whether students understand you or understand the language. Okay. Like, for example, if you say stand up, okay, instructions, right? If they are able to stand up, then that means they understand what you said, right? Okay. Or if you want to make it a little bit more complicated, you can say something like, uh, if I raise my right hand, then stand up. Okay. So that means they have to understand what you're saying, and there is also a physical response related to it. So what's the rationale behind it? Number one, as I said, sometimes you don't really want them or need them to respond with language. And secondly, when you have some form of physical activity connected to what you are doing, maybe they will understand it more. Okay. So, these are things that are part of what these designer methods try to focus on. Okay. So you also have Suggestopedia. It's kind of like, you know, a little bit of, mm, a little bit of providing support to language learners by not making them too anxious, because sometimes learning a language can be anxiety causing, right? Okay, can be anxiety causing because you don't know what the answer is, or you're not sure what the answer is, you're afraid to respond, and so on and so forth. Okay, so Suggestopedia is trying to make it a little bit less anxious. Supposedly, I think it's this method. Supposedly, you even play classical music when you're doing Suggestopedia so that the students become a little bit relaxed. I don't know, maybe it can work. Maybe some of these techniques used can work, but you don't have to take the whole method. You can, if you want, occasionally just play in the background classical music, but not so loudly lah. Just um, background music as you teach. See how they feel about it. Could be interesting. Okay, you could, as you teach certain things, or you try to emphasize certain grammar points, use a little bit of total physical response, just to see whether they understand. You can use conditionals like the example I gave you, and see whether they understand. Okay, and then you have if, then, and so on and so forth. Okay, and community language learning is basically just supporting each other, right? Okay. So you will also be, I think, some of these methods are actually also related to counseling. There's also a method called counseling learning or something like that. Can't sure. So some of the concepts of counseling are also used to reduce, once again, anxiety. Okay, so these things will more focus on a communicative approach, and it will probably not emphasize grammar so much. Okay, because grammar is going to cause a lot of anxiety. If you focus too much on grammar, it's going to cause a lot of anxiety. Okay, so these approaches tend to focus more on communication rather than on grammar. These were all kind of like videos that I had that if you wanted to look at them, maybe I will upload them on Putra Blast, but this is just uh, you know additional kind of information. Maybe what I'll do is I'll upload Jack Richards. Okay, Jack Richards communicative approach. Okay.
Doctor,
Yes.
what is the silent way method?
uh, the silent way method is a method where the teacher does not speak at all.
Really?
Yeah. uh, where the teacher does not speak at all, the teacher pretends as if he is someone who is, what do you call this? Dumb, yeah, cannot speak, right? Okay. And he does things in front of class, and he expects the students to interpret what he is doing. Okay. So in other words, you can imagine, I'm sure, the teacher maybe miming a few things. Actually, in the silent way, there's a lot of use of, um, you know, um, props. Yeah, props. Relia, props. Actually, they use rods and things like that. Okay. But I think you can understand a little bit of the rationale of trying to do that. Yeah, meaning to say the teacher does not say anything. Teacher only tries to communicate, physically or something like that, and the students will try to interpret things by saying out what is happening. Okay, so these are some of the designer methods, but you also have audiolingual method, which is indirect method, which are more institutionalized, okay, more formal. So what about grammar now? In present day teaching of grammar, these are some of the things that we are concerned about, explicit versus implicit teaching of grammar. This we have been talking about. Fluency versus accuracy, they're all related, because what do you want to do? Are you more, concerned about fluency, where you can speak very, very, fluently, but, uh, maybe you make some grammar mistakes, or are you more concerned about accuracy, where you may not be as fluent, but you speak with very little grammar mistakes, or you write maybe with very little grammar mistakes. Okay, but as I mentioned earlier, there seems to be some form of a grammar revival. Okay, and we've looked at traditional grammar, but I think, as I mentioned, there is also a focus or shift towards functional grammar. Okay, which is a little bit more complicated, but or unfamiliar, but it focuses on meaning. Yeah, it focuses on meaning, which seems to be what people are more concerned about. They don't want to talk about the meta language, which is the past tense, present tense, which is language about language. Yeah? They don't want to use those terms, but they want to focus on the meaning, yeah, the functions. So there is an emphasis of focus on form versus focus on forms. Okay, and we will talk about this later on. Yeah, traditionally we have focused on forms with an S at the end. Okay, traditionally we have focused on forms. Yeah, meaning to say we look at one form, and then we look at another form, and we look at another form, and we try to cover all the forms, as if we believe that that's the way to learn the language. We cover all the forms, the grammar points, one after another. But focus on form, no S, is slightly different. It's just as you teach, and when you become aware that maybe some of the students need a little bit more understanding of something, then you can focus on that form. There is no intention to try to teach all the forms from beginning to end in the syllabus. Okay, but the goal is to help the student understand by understanding the form. Yeah, maybe for example they don't understand the conditional, then you can just alter or modify your teaching slightly, so that it will focus on the if, the word if, and the word then. Okay, so that is focus on form. Okay, focus on forms, once again, means you try to cover everything, all the forms. Okay, from beginning till end, if there is an end. Yeah, one form after another. Yeah, okay. So other things like consciousness raising, making them a little bit more aware, paying a little bit more attention, noticing, yeah, making them aware of the grammar that helps to convey the meaning. Okay, so this is consciousness raising, and also noticing, yeah? Attention to form and noticing, yeah, language awareness. But generally, what has happened right now is there's a lot more student-centeredness. Yeah, there's a lot more student-centeredness. Okay, so student-centeredness has to a large extent taken over how we teach, right? And according to Thornbury, there are things like efficiency, the E factor, in terms of economy, how quickly, we don't have a lot of time to teach something. Okay, so economy means we have to decide what we will teach and what we won't teach. Okay, because of the time that we have in the classroom, okay, or the time that we have in a semester. So we have to look at it in terms of economy. Yeah, so it's almost impossible to say that, okay, we want to teach everything in grammar, because that's just too much or too many things to teach. And is referring to whether it's easy to pick it up or not, right? some things are easy. Okay, so if it's easy, maybe our approach will be different. Okay, and if it's a little bit more difficult, maybe either our approach will be slightly different, or we may not want to teach it. Okay, not wanting to teach it doesn't mean that we don't expose them to it, but we may not want to teach it, yeah, depending on the situation. And efficacy is helping the students to kind of like be prepared for uh, being able to learn the grammar point. Okay, so these are things that have been emphasized present day. There is also an A factor, which is appropriacy. What we teach needs to be appropriate to our students, yeah, in terms of content, in terms of their culture, in terms of their context, in terms of their motivation, in terms of their need. Yeah, all these things, all related to the A factor, appropriacy. So we'll have to think in terms of, the kind of materials that we use, whether they are appropriate. If they're not appropriate or not completely appropriate, it doesn't mean we throw it down into the trash can, but we can modify it. Yeah, we can modify it. Okay, so that's basically the last few slides of this presentation. Okay, so it's a beginning for, I think, to what we will be discussing in the next later presentations. Okay, so with that, I'm going to break for a while. Okay, and I want you to, hold on. I want you to look at the article that I have, given you to read. And this is the article, Grammar-Based Teaching, and it's by Betty Azar. Sorry, not Larson Freeman. Yeah, Betty Azar is another person who is quite famous when it comes to grammar. Okay, and some of the uh, grammar reference books. Okay, some of the popular grammar reference books are written by Betty Azar. Okay, take books, take books. If you want to read or use it as a grammar reference, it's a good idea. Okay, and I think that is an investment lah for you. Yeah, second year, when you go out in another 2 years, you got one or two good grammar reference books. I think it'll be good for you, because when you go out to teach, maybe there will be questions you cannot answer off the top of your heads, and you have to tell your students, let me check, and you can look at the reference books. Okay, so I'll stop for a while. Uh, I hope you go through this very quickly if you have not already, and maybe highlight a few important things that you want to point out. Mention which page, and we can, if we want to, we can discuss them if we have enough time. And then I will also at the end try to kind of like, mention a few things that I expect when you do your assignment. Okay. Okay, so I'll leave you to this for a while. Okay, maybe 5 minutes at most. Okay.
All right, doctor.
Sometime maybe, depending on how much you want to talk about it. Anybody wants to say anything about it? Who is the writer, first of all? Who is she? Not just the name, but who exactly is she?
An academic, like
Yeah.
she teach English in university.
Okay. She talks about practitioners and academics, right? So do you think she's more a practitioner or more an academic, or she refers to herself as a practitioner or as an academic?
Practitioner.
Yeah,
Just
she
more
she
practitioner.
refers to herself more as a practitioner. Although she may be teaching in the university, okay, she may be an academic, but she refers to herself more as a practitioner, okay, and she's giving her point of view as a practitioner, right? Okay,
Yes.
and her audience would probably be, of course, they would be what? Who? Who would her
New
audience?
teachers.
Yeah, the teachers, right? The
Other
teachers.
teachers.
Yeah, the teachers. Okay, those who are in, teaching grammar lah, especially. Okay. What do you think were her main points? Some of her main points.
Do both.
Do both. Okay.
Yeah, do both.
Okay, do both. Yeah, that's like as if you read only the first and second paragraph. Eh?
No, I mean like, oh, hold on.
Yeah, it's true. Do both. Okay, but do both was emphasized in the first few paragraphs, right? And then she went on to explain and elaborate on her points, right? But okay, what does she mean by do both? What do you kind of like, uh, get from this idea of do both?
I think what she was trying to say, instead of practicing one method, maybe you can like do two things, like practice two things in teaching grammar to your students. Like this one, she said, grammar-based teaching, and then with focus on form. So like she know that some of the students, they are more like focused on form method, and while other student who doesn't have ground grammar, they they don't, I don't know what to say right there, but yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, yeah, I think the beginning part of what you mentioned, I think was I agree with completely. You were basically saying that, if I understand you correctly, you were saying that you should be using both, because it seems like, in grammar teaching there's either one way or the other way. There are generally like two ways, whether you use authentic materials or you use non-authentic materials, isolated sentences or contextualized sentences, for example. So what she is basically saying is, don't kind of like ignore any one of them. You can favor one, but it doesn't mean that you completely throw the other one away. Okay, you can favor authentic materials, but it doesn't mean you cannot use isolated sentences or something like that. Okay, you can favor implicit teaching, but it doesn't mean you cannot teach explicitly the rules, or whatever. Okay, so and the thing about grammar based teaching and focus on form, yeah. So what I understand from what I read is that she is trying to make a comparison between the two, and she's basically saying that they are kind of like similar, yeah, because to her grammar based teaching is seen or reflected in focus on form. Yeah. And once again, there is a difference between focus on forms and focus on form. If you read the article, there are some parts there that talk about focus on form being trying to teach grammar within a communicative context. That's what focus on form means. So you're focusing on communication, okay? But occasionally you will focus on the form or the grammar because it's important for the communication. Okay, so that is focus on form, no S, yeah, focus on form. Okay, yeah, we're getting a little bit, into it. Any other comments?
The author also mentioned about she described the grammar-based teaching and gave all the varieties that can be done, the varieties option that we have for grammar-based teaching.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think she does. Very kind of like a detailed description of all the benefits and the things, the kind of things that grammar-based teaching can do. So she does elaborate on all those things. This article is slightly different from the previous article. Yeah. I think this one is very much more detailed than the previous one. The previous one is all anecdotal, yeah? Anecdotal, meaning to say it's all based on experience, anecdotal, yeah, stories, yeah, that the person went through, anecdotes, stories that the person went through. This one has a little bit more reference to what academic, studies have shown and things like that. Okay, although she does seem to say that it's more important to be a practitioner than an academic in making decisions regarding what is the best way to teach. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good points. Any other comments?
Doctor, if I'm
Yes.
not mistaken,
Yes.
she said that we need to teach grammar, but not as teaching rule. But she said that we can teach grammar, the use of grammar, but not uh, give the definition of grammar to the students, like what is
Mm,
noun, what is verb, but to teach how
mm.
we need to use the grammar.
The patterns first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very much also a reflection of student-centered teaching and learning, right? Okay. The reason why I say that this is more student-centered teaching and learning is because number one, learning has to be discovery. Okay. In some ways, it has to be discovery. So it's the student who will discover, not the teacher, telling them what the rules it is, how are, and the students having to memorize. Okay, this is the, of course, the ideal situation, because when you discover something it sticks with you more. Okay, but it doesn't work all the time. Regardless, this is what we hope we can do. And for me personally, that's the approach that we should take first. And if it doesn't seem to work, maybe we can be a little bit more explicit. Okay, but we should not be explicit first, and then no point in trying to be implicit, right? After that, yeah, you should be implicit first. That means you try to, not teach the rules, but work, get them to try to discover or realize what's happening. And if it doesn't seem to work, then we can be a little bit more explicit, a little bit more. Okay. Just now I saw the yellow box on, who was it just now? Uh, Yao Yi, do you want to say anything? No? I thought I saw the yellow box on your name. No, okay. Anybody else wants to say anything? Which are you more convinced about? This grammar-based teaching, which is also focused on form, or teaching grammar through reading or literature? Which do you seem to prefer, since you've read both articles now?
I think this one
Grammar-based
is
teaching.
Me
more
too.
convincing.
Grammar-based teacher.
Grammar-based teaching.
You feel this one, so you're not,
Yeah.
you're not convinced about trying to teach grammar using, getting them to read and
No, because I always think that the rules should be presented first, then you can imply it. So if you solely just imply all the rules into like teaching poetry, so they wouldn't remember if they are doing something else. Like, okay, I remember learning grammar in literature class, so I'm doing poetry. But then when they try to use the rules for essays, they might, encounter difficulties to relate
Okay.
with the terms and all. So that is why I think grammar based teaching, where the teacher present the rule first then implied, it's more, how do you say, effective for the students. Like you present the rule then drills.
Okay. But the grammar based teaching here does not really mean that you teach very traditionally, right? Doesn't mean that you teach them the rules and then you get them to practice the rules. Does that mean is it what is meant by grammar-based teaching? Yeah. Well, what do you get from the article? Is that how she is suggesting that grammar be taught?
Because she mentioned that she had less problems when the rules have been presented first to the students throughout the school years.
Mhm.
So that is why I think she believed that the rules need to be presented, need to be taught first. I
Okay,
think that is why.
which page are you referring to? Is there any?
Nakiba mentioned it just now. Wait, I'm trying to search it.
Okay.
It's under the nature of language and concept 1, 2, 3.
Under
For
the nature of
paragraph 4.
uh, the nature of language. Oh, the nature of language and concepts of grammar. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Almost nothing is more difficult than trying to explain to a student with no concept
Okay.
of grammar.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Um, I don't really believe that this is specific to a classroom lesson where you have to teach the grammar rule first and then proceed from there. Okay. I think what she wants to focus on is the importance of making grammar prominent in some way, but not necessarily through every lesson or having grammar lessons explicit all the time. Okay, but she definitely focuses on the importance of students understanding grammar. Okay, so this is my reading of it lah. Yeah, this is my reading of it. That it's important for the students to have an idea of how the language works. So it's important for them to have a concept of grammar. You know, to have an idea of how important grammar is to language. That for her is important, but I don't think this um, would immediately or automatically imply that you have to teach grammar first and then you move on to other things. Okay, but I definitely agree that with you that she is saying that it's important for the students to be aware of the importance of grammar. Okay, Iqbal? Yeah, so slightly different. What I'm trying to really get at is I really do not agree to all lessons related to grammar being involving presenting the rules first, yeah, and getting the students to understand the rules, and then doing some practices on grammar, you know, that kind of a format. I'm not too keen on that happening all the time. Okay, sometimes, okay, yeah, sometimes okay.
I
Because
feel
it
like
depends.
I'm going to be a boring teacher.
Not necessarily, not necessarily. Maybe some students, maybe they can, or they like something like that. Some context, something like that would be expected. So if it is what learners expect, then maybe that's what you should do or you should consider doing. But the point here is that the teacher has to be very flexible and has to always assess whether it is effective or not. Okay, because if you're doing something and it doesn't seem to work, then you have to have other resources that you can fall back on and do it a different way. So the point I'm trying to make is now we know that there are many different options. Okay, there are many different options, and if we can agree that the best way of learning is for the students to discover on their own rather than try to memorize, right? Rather than try to memorize. Okay. So how we get to that point can be, different means. Maybe you can start off by presenting the rule very explicitly and then go on. And maybe some of the students are very happy with that. Okay. Nobody's bored. Yeah. Nobody is complaining or anything like that. Okay. Or every time they seem to be, they seem to be responding positively. Maybe because they already have a level of language, which is, and they want to just polish up or brush up and by explaining things explicitly, they begin to realize what actually is happening, which they already were kind of like realizing on their own. But if this does not work, if you're teaching very weak students and they're not responding, I'm sure you'll be not just a boring teacher, but a bad teacher. If you are continuing with the same approach, okay? And
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
that it's not working, but you continue with the same approach. So the point here is again that you should build up your resources. Now you should know how what's happening. You should know explicit teaching, what's its benefits, what's its limitations, and then you should know what implicit teaching is, grammar-based teaching, focus on form, so that there are different ways of trying to present the language so that the students will discover and acquire the language and they become more proficient in language. Yes, Philomena. Yes, something to say? No? Ikwan? No?
Um, yeah, so I think I will have to, build up my resources when I become a teacher so that, I wouldn't want to be a boring teacher by just presenting rules, I guess. I guess we'll see how,
Yeah.
which type of students I got later
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. But if you're, it's part of your arsenal, part of your arsenal, the many different ways of presenting the grammar parts. And if you know many different ways, whether it's explicit or implicit or whatever, through communication, through TPR, etc., etc. Why not? It makes it more variety is important also. Okay. Anybody else has anything to say? Yes, Iza? Nur Iza?
No,
No?
the yellow book was on me because I just rejoined. I was
Oh,
cut off
because you
just
just
now.
rejoined. I see. Okay. Okay. Um, so any final words? Um,
Can I talk?
yes?
For grammar-based teaching, I like the way that uh, in grammar-based teaching, it explains from the example
Right.
and not from the rules. I like that way because for me, I understand the way how grammar works from the example itself, not from the explanation. Like if a doctor give explanation, I will be, oh, okay, okay. But when doctor give an example for that particular subject or particular rules, I will be much more understand about that. So
Yeah.
I really like the fact that grammar-based teaching use example to give explanation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Okay. And I think I expect that maybe in your assignments, these are some of the things that you should highlight. What, especially of certain, of the articles, really struck you, really made you, you really agreed to. And this is true, if you can give examples, examples may be better than rules. Even in Betty Azar's article, she says that she doesn't use the word rules. She only uses rules with vocabulary or punctuation, I think. I don't know, I can't remember, but not with grammar. Okay, and using examples, students tend to understand more. Okay, so maybe instead of trying to go for the rules all the time, okay, use examples. You want to write something on the board, don't write the rules, write the examples. Okay, and the more examples, the better. Sometimes people talk about examples and non-examples. Okay, sentences and that are not examples as compared to sentences that are examples. Okay, so things like this will help. Yeah, it's a way of presenting how language works, and I think that examples may be better than rules because they get the students to think and understand. Okay, so once again, if you remember the first presentation, we want to engage our students, right? So to engage our students means to get them to think. Okay, if you focus too much on the rules, they're not really thinking. They're really just remembering, memorizing, trying to memorize. Okay, so yeah, these are all um, interesting views. Okay, so okay, I assume that everything. Okay, we don't have. We're gone just 10 minutes past the hour. Okay, of course we can go all the way up to 11 and 12. Okay, but I don't think any of you are interested to do that. Okay, so but I would like to talk about the assignment, right? The assignment, let me see. The assignment, mm, the assignment is a one-page opinion paper based on the two articles and discussions on giving language back in grammar-based teaching. The one page is the minimum, yeah. The one page is the minimum because sometimes when you want to express your opinion, one page may not be enough. But don't go beyond 3 pages, lah. It's a one page minimum thing. And I think what you can do is you can, after reading both the articles, you can highlight what you think is the most interesting thing that you found after reading both articles, okay, or making a comparison between the two. Okay, what seemed to be the most interesting difference between the two, for example. Okay, so if you can highlight that, then you can probably get it done in one page or a little bit more than one page. I think if it is a little bit more than one page, it's because you want to first of all summarize the first article, or and then summarize the second article, and then the next paragraph could be uh, what you have gained from comparing the two articles or reading the two articles. Okay, so something like that. As I said, minimum one page. Okay, you do one page, you already meet the requirements, but don't make it too long. Don't make it more than 3 pages. Okay, I think many of you or many of the groups would go 1.5 pages or maybe even 2 pages. Okay. Other than that, anything else about the articles? Nothing, Aiza. You're shaking your head. Yeah. Okay. I don't think they were difficult reading, right? I think they were kind of straightforward. The first article was easier perhaps to read than the second. The second has a lot more content. Okay. But of course, we know who the second writer was. The first writer was basically anonymous. Yeah, we don't know who the writer was. Okay. Okay. Maybe some other comments about the articles. Suhail, you've been very quiet today. Yasin, no comments. Shafiq,
I don't really have any comments. Just that I do agree with what Iman said that by giving examples and you can actually understand quite better.
you agree or you disagree?
That's all.
Huh?
Agree.
You agree?
Agree. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What else besides besides this? I'm sure there are a lot of other things there in that article because it's a very long article, right? It's a longer article than the first one. Everybody has microphone turned off. Ashraf, you have something to say?
Noted. So I was wondering about the designer approach. Maybe can there be like a approach where you can combine like total physical response with social media or something? Is that gonna be a good idea or it's just gonna mess things up?
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's a question that I actually kind of like you know mentioned in some way. Yeah, because I said that like for example TPR, total physical response. It's a method that I'm sure has got many steps and so on and so forth. But you don't have to follow everything. You just understand the concept of what they're trying to achieve through total physical response, and you can combine it with other approaches. Like if in Suggestopedia, it's got music, and actually in addition to music, classical music and not pop music or anything like that. Okay. It's also got, supposedly it's got very soft sofas. Students don't sit on hard chairs. They sit, to make them a lot more relaxed. So things like that can be combined. Yeah. You can have total physical response, and you can combine it with Suggestopedia. And of course, you can have a communicative approach, but both of them are already communicative, supposedly communicative. Okay. Yeah. Uh, techniques from these designer approaches can be used. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else has anything else to mention? I'm not sure whether, once again, there are only 46 or 45 students around, yeah? Which means that there's still people who have not attended. Aiman is not here, okay? Aiman is not here, right? And I think there are also a few, maybe from overseas, from China, there's one who's not here, okay, that I noticed, okay. So Sasmita, you've been very quiet. You do have any comments?
No comments, doctor.
No comments? No opinions? Nothing?
Not really. Like I liked how Imanina explained her point.
Which was?
The one about using examples more than explanations. Because yeah, like
Okay.
even I, when I look at examples, it's like
we look at several examples that like are about the same like grammar rule or something, it's like you start to pick up patterns. So like you find the answer yourself. So it also encourages the students to like think
Okay. Yeah. So
and make connections rather than just giving explanations and expecting them to listen and remember.
Okay. Yes. I would agree. So I would like to just emphasize on the word patterns, and I think that that's how the mind works. Yeah, that we pick up patterns rather than try to remember rules. It'd be easier if we pick up those patterns than try to remember and apply rules. In when we speak. So this is something that once again, people talk about language as if it is just uh, very simple, but it's very psychological. Okay, language. It's also very philosophical. So being a language teacher is actually very challenging. So when you talk about patterns, you're actually talking about how the mind works and something which is psychological. Yeah. So that's something to be aware of. They were dealing with something very uh, you know difficult and complicated actually. Okay, you have anything to say? Anything else? Anybody else? Everybody, as I said, have got their microphones off. Okay. It's like, you're in a classroom and everybody is kind of like, what? The microphones off is the same uh, as what? As uh, not wanting to speak, having their mouths closed all the time. No, I don't know what it's similar to. Okay, but everybody has their microphones off. Uh, but of course, do you know that here you can actually unmute? Like for example, if I wanted Faris to say something, then I can ask him to unmute. Faris, are you there? Maybe he's taking a break. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Who's that?
Amira, Doctor, I would like to ask about the assignment.
Who is that now? I can't see who speaking.
Myra, Doctor, Myra.
Oh, okay, yes.
I would like to ask about the assignment. When is the due date actually? It says in the
week 3.
Week 3, right? But what day, what date is it?
Usually when I say week 3, it's at the end of the week lah.
Or in the end of the week. All right.
So it's a
Friday
Friday.
lah kan? All
Okay,
right, sure.
yeah. So even assignment 2, it's something that you take home and you send it in at the end of the week, which is at the end of week 7 for assignment 2, at the end of week 3 for assignment 1. Okay, and once again, remember I have allowed you to work in groups of 3 maximum. Yeah? Okay. So one final comment before we close everything down for today. And who would want to give that final comment? Anybody? I mean, you've read 2 articles. Surely you have a lot of things to say, and you're going to come up with your own assignment. I mean, your own opinions in an assignment. So surely there's a lot of content for you to say things, to talk about. Okay, let's have people who have been very quiet so far. Who wants to say something? Kingi? King Yi. Where are you?
Yes, doctor.
Yes. Do you have anything to say? Any comments or any opinions?
I don't have much comments, but I just think that because in our previous discussion, I mentioned about how I would like incorporating grammar in teaching literature in some sort of a more systematic way. And now in this article, the author actually proposed something more systematic, or he touched on how to incorporate she touched on how to incorporate the two elements in explicit teaching and also implicit teaching. So I think that is quite interesting. And maybe I would like to read more on how she actually uses the methods and adapts it in the classroom.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I would, agree that this article does present something or the teaching of grammar in a more systematic manner. And this is also an issue with implicit teaching of grammar, that a lot of people complain that it's not systematic. It's not systematic. That explicit teaching of grammar is a little bit more systematic. But of course, we know what some potential drawbacks of explicit teaching of grammar are. So we need something in the middle, and of course, systematic. Presenting something systematic is very important. So this is our quest to look for something which is maybe not extremely explicit, but still a little bit systematic. Yeah. So somewhere in between. Yeah. Somewhere in between. So yeah, this is important point that you have raised. That we're looking for things that are systematic. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I think that's a good point raised as well. I think we are done, unless anybody wants to be the, you know, last minute kind of person who wants to say something in the end. Okay. No. Okay. If not, then we are done. I'll put up the next presentations. Maybe hopefully by the end of this week, and I'll meet you again on Monday. Okay. So okay. So that's it then. Goodbye. See you again on Monday. Oh yeah. Don't go away yet. Okay. Let me take the attendance.
Everyone is like,
okay. Now suddenly everybody appears, huh? Okay. So I know when you not when I don't see your face, it's like you're in class and you have your book in front of your face. Okay, hiding. That was page 1. So hold on for a while. Let me just take page 2. Don't say anything, because then you move to the different page. Okay, so today is, what's the date today? Yeah? Today is the 30th, right? 31st. Okay, so we're done. That's it. Meet you on Monday then. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Welcome. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.